Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Camp.
Call the buzzer. Call.
Take him back! Take him out!
You die in person as well. We kick things off in Steubenville, Ohio, to an incident that may be disturbing for some viewers. It's 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, just outside the entrance of the Jefferson County Courthouse. The man in white is Judge Joseph Brazise, who's on his way to work. A man approaches the judge from across the street, and he's holding a gun. Judge Brazise puts up his hands in defense, but it's too late. The man fires. What you're watching is not some random shooting. The man with the pistol is 51-year-old Nathaniel Richmond. Just a few months earlier, Richmond filed a wrongful death suit on behalf of his mother, who died in a fire at her home, along with Richmond's 2-year-old great-nephew. Richmond was suing the Jefferson Metropolitan Housing Authority, who leased the home to the family, claiming conditions inside were defective, making it susceptible to a fire. But a few days before this attack, the Housing Authority filed a motion to dismiss the damages in the case. Judge Brazise was scheduled to preside over an upcoming hearing on the motion, but Nathaniel Richmond had other ideas. Richmond fires 5 shots at Brazise at point-blank range, hitting him once in the abdomen. But in the struggle, Richmond appears to drop his gun. Though the judge has been hit, he's not about to back down. Turns out, he's got a gun of his own. He fires at Richmond, hitting him once. The judge narrowly escapes, but instead of waiting for help, he gets up. Brazise prepares to fire again, which he does, getting off 5 more rounds. Meanwhile, an injured Richmond heads for his car, but a probation officer who happens to be on the scene rushes over and begins firing. He hits Richmond 2 more times. Judge Brazise, still on his feet, takes cover across the street as officers from the courthouse arrive. Turns out backup will not be necessary. Richmond is pronounced dead at the scene. Judge Brazise, meanwhile, is taken to a nearby hospital for his back at work. As for Richmond's lawsuit against the Housing Authority, it's dismissed.
What would ever possess you to take someone to a crack house?
Next, we're in Mount Clemens, Michigan, the sentencing hearing of Janice Morgan. The 45-year-old previously pleaded guilty to possession of a controlled substance after police found cocaine in her car. Morgan claims the drugs weren't hers, and instead that they belonged to a friend whom she'd just driven to a drug house.
I don't do drugs. I haven't done drugs since I was a teenager.
Well, then why are you here?
Because I took a friend asked me to take her, and I did.
You don't have good friends.
That's veteran Judge Mary Chernowski, also known as Scary Mary by the defendants who face her. As you can see, she is not one to mince words.
What would ever possess you to take someone to a crack house? Do you know how dangerous that is?
She's 45 years old. Prior contact with the criminal justice system. Her mother is present with her this morning and has been in prior proceedings.
Can you explain something to me? You're 45 years old. Yes?
Yes.
So that makes you a year older than me. I would never bring my mother to court with me at that age. Why would you put your mom through that?
Because she's the one who bailed me out of jail. She's wanted to be here
Okay.
with me.
Do you realize that there's going to come a point in your life when your mom's not going to be around and you're going to have to stand on your own 2 feet?
Yes.
How come you sat in jail for 4 days? How'd that happen?
My mom wanted me to sit there.
Good mom. I like moms like that.
After giving the defendant's mother some credit, Judge Chernowski then gives her a little advice.
If she's going to continue with the drugs, you got to kick her out. You got gotta put your foot down or else it's gonna continue and it's only gonna get worse. You understand that, Mom?
Yes.
Somebody cares about you. That friend that you drove to the crack house? Turn around. You see her in here? No, she's not here. Because she doesn't care about you. That woman in the back of the courtroom cares. So when are we going to start standing on our own 2 feet? Today.
And today, Judge Chernowski allows Morgan to walk out on her own 2 feet, sentencing her to 2 years probation instead of jail time. But before the hearing ends, Morgan has a final question for the judge.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I live with a guy that was convicted of a felon, but he's
That's not good.
Rather than making a ruling on the defendant's living arrangements herself, the judge knows exactly who to ask.
Do you want to know who knows best? Moms know best. Mom, is this a good character for her to be living with?
my answer to that is no.
She's not living with him. You are going to find a new place to live. You are not to have any contact with anybody who is a convicted felon. Thank you.
Thank you. And as the defendant leaves the courtroom, Judge Scary Mary gives one last order.
And now don't get mad at your mom.
You will die in prison.
Next, we take you to Los Lunas, New Mexico, for the trial of Andrew Romero. He's been charged with first-degree murder in the killing of police officer Greg Benner. The key witness in the case is Romero's ex-girlfriend, Tabitha Littles. She was present the night Officer Benner was killed. More than a year earlier, the couple had reportedly committed 9 robberies in the Albuquerque area to support their drug habit. In these surveillance images, taken a few hours before Officer Benner was killed, you can see an armed Romero robbing a fast food restaurant. Romero had a long criminal past that included manslaughter, and according to Littles, Romero said if he was ever stopped by police, it was either going to be him or the cops. So when Officer Benner pulled them over for driving with a suspicious license plate and approached the vehicle, Romero shoved Littles out of the car. He then fired 4 shots, hitting Officer Benner 3 times. He died at the scene. Police eventually caught up with the couple, and they were both charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery and murder. Littles was looking at a possible life sentence because, according to prosecutors, she knew Romero was ready to kill Benner and did nothing to stop it. So she cut a deal with the state and agreed to testify against Romero, who pled not guilty.
You have agreed that you will testify in the prosecution of the co-defendant Angela Romero. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
At Romero's trial, Littles becomes the star witness as she takes the stand and tries to explain the events of the evening.
You know Andrew has the gun. You know it's loaded. You know what he said. Officer Benner's approaching you after you're thrown out. Why did you tell him anything?
It all happened so fast. And I honestly didn't think that he was gonna shoot anybody.
Who shot Officer Benner?
It goes boom, 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 boom. I heard 4 shots.
Meanwhile, Romero's attorney attempts to paint Littles as someone just motivated by self-interest.
You face life plus dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of years, right?
Yes.
And life, at 34, if you'd been convicted of all this, you would have left the penitentiary in a box, right?
Yes.
When asked about the victim's family, Littles finally begins to show some remorse.
I feel very sad. It should never have happened, you know? I feel bad for his wife, his family. It's not that I don't want to show emotion. I hold my emotion in, so nobody can sit here and say that I do not show emotion. I do not care.
With Little's testimony, as well as Romero's DNA, which was found on the murder weapon, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. At sentencing, Officer Benner's widow looked on as Romero sat casually, even smirking for the cameras.
All right.
But Judge George Eichwald wasn't amused and offered the convicted cop killer a few final thoughts of his own.
What I would really like to happen to you, I can't
Saying Corker that probably be removed from office. You will die in prison.
Romero was sentenced to life in prison, no chance of parole. As for Littles, by testifying against Romero as part of her plea deal, she avoided a life sentence and instead received 16 years in a New Mexico state prison. For our next story, we go to Palm Beach County, Florida. The prosecutor is 28-year-old Brandon Dinetz. He's asked his girlfriend, Jennifer Letman, to watch his opening statement since she too is an attorney. Brandon told her it's a big DUI case and he could use her support. But there's something else going on here today.
Let's bring in the jury, please.
The judge calls the jury in, but Jennifer quickly realizes something's amiss. For starters, there's 17 jurists in the jury box instead of the usual 12, and Jennifer personally knows each and every one of them.
Very good. All right, now have a seat.
If you haven't already guessed, this is not a real trial. But Brandon still has a statement he'd like to make.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Typically I start my openings by talking about the privilege I have of representing the state of Florida. A moment to confer with co-counsel.
Brandon's about to introduce Exhibit A to the court. Let's hope there aren't any objections.
This will happen if you adjourn for a well order. Will you marry me?
Brandon spent 5 months preparing for this day. And from Jennifer's reaction, and everyone else's, the verdict appears to be unanimous. Next, we go to McLennan County, Texas. It's February 2021. This is 41-year-old Nicholas Miller, and he's on the run.
Well, how this is going to end, but I guarantee you, we'll see. If I pull over with my hands high, see what happens there.
4 days prior to recording this video, Miller was in Mason County over 100 miles away. That's where he allegedly set fire to the Mason County Courthouse. And this is no ordinary courthouse. It's a civic landmark built in 1909 that locals refer to as their Grand Old Lady. Miller reportedly told several Mason residents he intended to burn down the courthouse because he was upset over a previous domestic case. In addition to the courthouse, police also believe Miller started a second fire at a residential home a mile away. While the courthouse burned, Miller allegedly stole a truck and a gun and left town. Police pursue Miller over 3 counties, but he shows no sign of slowing down. Along the way, Miller live streams the chase as law enforcement closes in from behind and above. Miller's absolutely right. Choppers, as well as a dozen state troopers, all on his tail. As police drop several spike strips on the road, Miller realizes his time is almost up.
Hey, look. Well, how this is going to end, but I guarantee you, we'll see. If I pull over with my hands high, see what happens there.
After 170 miles and a few blown-out tires, Miller finally brings the truck to a stop. But even as an army of officers approach, he continues streaming.
Because they tell me my kids are all right. That means I got to drop my hands. Y'all understand that, right? Got to. Hey, but wait.
There's nowhere for Miller to go, and now he informs police he has a weapon.
I got a gun! I got a gun! I'm not going to! Andrew.
Miller's quickly taken into custody, charged with arson, vehicle theft, and evading police. His bail is set at $1.8 million. And as he awaits trial, he sits in the McLennan County Jail. Meanwhile, with the help of donations, Mason County has begun the long process of restoring its historic courthouse to its former glory. Next, we take you to Portland, Oregon, for the sentencing of Jack Whitaker. He's been convicted of driving under the influence of intoxicants, second-degree assault, and reckless driving. Whitaker was high on meth when he crashed into 19-year-old Kayla Wilson as she was driving home from a job interview. Wilson was 5 months pregnant, and the injuries she sustained left her in a vegetative state. The baby was delivered 5 weeks later in an emergency C-section, but not without complications. Whitaker, who has a long criminal history, pled not guilty. But the evidence against him was overwhelming, including toxic levels of meth found in his blood, and the fact that it was Whitaker's Jeep that crushed the side of Wilson's car. He was found guilty and is now facing a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. Before the judge hands down his sentence, Kayla's father delivers an emotional message to the court and an unsympathetic defendant.
Kayla is 21 years old and has been in a hospital bed for 2 years. This April.
I'm in jail for 2 years for not doing it.
She will never know her mom and dad again.
I didn't do it.
When Wilson was finished, Whitaker had a chance to seek forgiveness. But that's not what he's looking for. Though he admitted to being high on meth the day of the crash, he denies that he hit Kayla Wilson.
Just because the jury found me guilty does not mean that I'm guilty.
Finally, it's Judge Jerry Hodson's turn to address the court. That is, if Whitaker allows him to speak.
Mr. Whitaker, you had a chance already. This is my opportunity.
Yeah, well, I didn't do it.
As the judge speaks to Kayla's family, he struggles to contain his emotions.
I'm deeply sorry that you've had to endure the life-changing injuries to Kayla, to her daughter, and to the rest of the family.
The judge sentences Whitaker to the maximum allowed by the state, 11 years in prison. Whitaker seems baffled by the whole experience as officers prepare to take him away.
You've been sentenced to 11 years.
11 years?
Yeah.
For being innocent? You're kidding me. 11 years. That's
11
what it
years.
is. There's no more. 11? That's enough. I can die.
Yeah.
Kayla and her daughter would eventually move into her parents' home. But in 2018, Kayla died from a seizure brought upon by infection. Her death allowed the state to file new charges against Whitaker for manslaughter. He pled no contest and was sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison. His earliest release date is 2026. He'll be 69 years old. As for Kayla's daughter, she's being raised by Kayla's parents. That's all for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.